Imagine for a second a 13-year-old girl named Kothai, living roughly 1300 years ago in South India. In an era bound by incredibly strict rules, she was the total rebel. Kothai absolutely refused to marry any mortal man. Instead, she fell profoundly in love with the deity Lord Vishnu, and she'd secretly wear the garlands meant for his temple idol, pretending to be his bride. Well, when a shocked father found out, legend says Vishnu himself actually appeared in a dream accepting Kothai as his wife. And during her wedding procession into the temple's inner sanctum, she literally merged with the idol. Today, she is legendary, known to millions as Andal. Welcome to This Explainer. I'm your host, and today we're unpacking the historical record to explore the incredible cultural revolution Kothai was a part of. We are analyzing a massive socio-religious uprising that challenged the era's deepest hierarchies and totally transformed Indian society, the Bhakti Movement.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the clash of ancient faiths, move into the grassroots Bhakti uprising, look at the literature of the people, see how they went about institutionalizing the movement, and finish up with the tidal wave northward. Let's dive right in.
Part 1. Clash of Ancient Faiths.
So to really understand what sparked this movement, we have to look at the 6th century in Tamilakam, which was defined by intense cultural tension. On one side, you had the traditional Orthodox Vedic faith. This was heavily based on complex ritualistic stipulations, really rigid hierarchies, and the elite Sanskrit language. But then, a wave of invaders known as the Kalabras swept into the region. They defeated the traditional ruling dynasties and started patronizing the Shramana religions, specifically Jainism and Buddhism. These faiths quickly dominated the urban centers, the mercantile societies, and the royal courts. For the practitioners of the Vedic Puranic religion, these new state-sponsored faiths felt like a major alien threat to their native Tamil roots.
Which brings us to Part 2, the grassroots Bhakti uprising.
You've probably heard the word bhakti before. It comes from the Sanskrit bhaj, meaning to worship or revere. But in practice, it meant cultivating an incredibly intimate relationship and intense, passionate love for a personal chosen deity. And common people absolutely gravitated toward this. Why? Because it wasn't about distant, unapproachable gods or super expensive, exclusive sacrifices. This was a true back-to-the-soil movement, led by everyday poet saints, empowering the common masses to just bypass those strict religious gatekeepers and connect directly with the divine.
To put that into perspective, under the older Orthodox or Shramana systems, the language of faith was elite Sanskrit or Prakrit. But the Bhakti movement, it used accessible, everyday Tamil set to familiar folk melodies. While older systems focused on complex rituals, Bhakti focused purely on personal love. It forcefully shifted power away from the urban mercantile class, deeply empowering rural agrarian society. It completely stripped away the elitism, opening up a direct path to the divine for everyone, and fundamentally challenging the rigid caste and gender divisions of the era.
To really feel the power of this, we just need to turn to the historical record left by Kothai, or Andal. She wrote, "Help me to find within me my beloved. When he folds me in close embrace, melts my heart. Then rain down upon us." It's incredibly passionate, isn't it? This isn't just sweet poetry. This is primary historical evidence of a profound shift toward intense, barrier-breaking personal devotion.
And the persuasive power of this relatable devotion was massive. Take the story of Appar, one of the most famous Nayanar saints. He had actually left home to join a Jain monastery, but after suffering an agonizing stomach illness, he went back home where his sister gave him sacred ash and a mantra. Appar spontaneously composed a Tamil hymn to Shiva, and miraculously, his illness was cured. He immediately renounced Jainism and returned to Shaivism. Micro-narratives like this highlight the intense religious rivalries of the time and how personal, relatable miracles drew people right back to their native roots.
Moving on to Part 3, Literature of the People.
22,426. The sheer scale of this literary explosion is staggering. We're talking 4,000 verses dedicated to Vishnu by the Alwars saints, and 18,426 songs dedicated to Shiva by the Nayanar saints. And here's the coolest part. They didn't just write about high theology. These poems immortalized peasant agriculture, the jingling bells of bulls, the changing seasons, trade, and daily village life. They took the everyday existence of rural agrarian communities and turned it into sacred text.
But make no mistake, this was also a fierce battle of ideas. Samandar, who was this legendary child prodigy of the movement, perfectly captured this tension. He wrote, "Those Buddhists and mad Jains may slander speak, but he who came to earth and begged for alms, he is the thief who stole my heart away." You see, this literature wasn't just devotional poetry. It was often a bitter socio-political polemic against competing Orthodox sects.
It's a raw historical window into the intense competition for followers and royal patronage.
Part 4. Institutionalizing the movement.
So how did this grassroots rebellion become the establishment? Art historian Vidya Deheja notes, the saints of South India acquired a position of such great eminence that a cult arose around them. Bronze sculptures of these saints were literally commissioned by every temple, and these bronzes became incredibly central to temple life because they gave the common masses a tangible, relatable human figure to connect with. By elevating everyday rebels, many of whom came from lower castes, to secondary incarnations of deities, the movement essentially bypassed the traditional priestly class entirely.
So you get this really fascinating logical progression. Step 1, it begins as radical grassroots devotion in the villages. Step 2, it gains a mass rural following through those accessible Tamil hymns. And finally, Step 3, the institutionalization. Temple architecture played a huge role here. The movement established 108 divyadesams, or holy places, completely embedding their sacred geography into the physical stone and spatial layout of formal temples. The rebels literally became the very pillars of establishment religious life.
And finally, Part 5. The tidal wave northward.
It's fascinating to watch this movement build momentum across the subcontinent over the centuries. It originates down in Tamilakam between the 6th and 9th centuries. By the 12th century, figures like Basavana are spreading bhakti into Karnataka. Then in the 13th century, Saint Nyaneshwar and the Varkare movement bring it to Maharashtra. And post-13th century, this tidal wave of devotion just crashes into northern India and flows all the way up to Punjab.
Everywhere this wave hit, it brought the exact same democratizing power of language, empowering vernaculars like Kannada, Marathi, Maithili, Awadhi, Bhojpuri, and Punjabi. A really revolutionary example is Saint Danyeshwar's work, the Danyeshwari. He took the Bhagavad Gita, which was locked away in elite Sanskrit, and translated it into conversational Marathi. This was a real game changer. It radically democratized the religious texts, bypassing Brahmin gatekeepers and handing direct theological access right back to the common person.
Now here's where things get really interesting as we trace this history. The movement actually mutated, depending on where it was. In the South, Tamil Bhakti largely championed traditional Vedic Puranic traditions as a defense against the dominance of those Jain and Buddhist sects we talked about earlier. But in the North, it became a fierce form of social protest. It actively worked to subvert the rigid Hindu Brahmin orthodoxy and heavily criticized the caste system. So while the devotion itself remained intensely personal everywhere, the social target of the rebellion shifted depending on the geography.
So what does this all mean for us today? I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. How do the echoes of these 6th century poet saints, who fought so fiercely for direct, unmediated access to the divine, still shape our modern notions of equality and personal spirituality? From a teenage girl refusing to conform to a sweeping wave that democratized language and challenged caste hierarchies, the Bhakti movement wasn't just ancient history. It laid the very foundations for devotional equality that millions still practice right now. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking questions.